One of the most common terms we use in modern living could be the word stress. We often hear people saying that they are stressed out, and stress sustained over a long period of time could be detrimental to our well-being. How can the arts help us cope with stress and to recover from chronic anxiety? Let's talk more about the arts and stress today. I hope this doesn't get too stressful.
Stress is not all bad if we can learn from it. So if we are constantly stressed out in our studies or at work, then that could be a prompt or a signal for us to do something differently. For example, we may need to review our working style or studying method so that things can turn out for us better next time. When we do that, we're using stress to grow in the areas that we may be lacking in. So there's something good about it. And if we need a little adrenaline rush or a push to progress things or to move forward, then stress can be useful too. I think in psychology there's a term that describes this good form of stress.
Yes, it's called Eustress. It's a kind of positive stress that we experience when we go on roller coaster rides, report at work for our new job, or go on a first date.
So how was your first date?
Is that a trick question? My mom is watching this video. Coming back to Eustress. It's a form of good stress that helps us experience feelings of happiness and making us feel alive because it gives us something to look forward to and overcome. It challenges us without us feeling threatened. This is very different from chronic stress that greatly handicaps us.
Yes, chronic stress can impact us very greatly because it not only affects our emotions, it can actually affect our physical well-being and even our brain functions.
So in what specific ways can our brain be negatively impacted by stress?
Stress can reduce and shrink the prefrontal cortex in our brain that's related to memory, self-control, and higher thinking skills. That may explain why some children in school experience learning difficulties as a result of chronic stress.
Oh, what kind of stress do the children face?
Children can face all kinds of stress, and some may undergo chronic stress that comes from poverty, neglect, abuse, a change in family structure, or events that could possibly lead to a trauma that have lasting effects on a child.
These all sound very real and a little discouraging to know, especially if the children are victims of their circumstance. Is there anything we can do in these scenarios? What's the role of arts in healing?
There are definitely a lot of things that we can do to manage stress and even recover from a trauma. Let's start from art making and stress reduction. So Pat, since you have taken psychology in school, why don't you share with us on how the arts can help to reduce stress?
Well, a plethora of research shows how art making is both a relaxing and enjoyable activity. This directly counters feelings of helplessness and vulnerability that chronic stress produces. But beyond this, art making also helps people express experiences that are too difficult to put into words. In fact, psychologists have found that students who often express their thoughts and feelings are left with a clearer mind and thus are able to cope with stress better. Furthermore, art making also increases the release of a chemical called dopamine. This chemical is responsible for making us feel happier. So we can say bye-bye to stress as negative feelings begin giving way to happier ones. Here we can really see how art making not only helps us cope with stress better, but also directly battles feelings of anxiety that chronic stress produces.
I've heard of how exercising will release endorphins to keep us happy. So it's nice to know that art making can release dopamine to help us relieve stress. Following what we have said, arts can also train us to keep us focused. When we are creating a piece of art, we are setting everything else aside and giving it our full attention. This will redirect our thoughts away from our worries. and stop all the negative racing thoughts in our mind, which can be otherwise very damaging. Learning to refocus on areas beyond our stress will help us to cope better in our daily life. Getting into actions to get things done will give us a sense of achievement and empowerment, and that will build our muscles to overcome stress. Worrying, is what we usually do, really doesn't help. And seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance will diminish our ability to manage the situation.
This brings us to our next important point. The stories we feed our mind can either heal or worsen the stress or trauma. This is because stress is greatly affected by the views we take of events. For example, imagine I'm preparing for an examination and I realize I don't have enough time to study for it. If I begin thinking of my future failure and being retained in my studies, this will result in sweating, tension, and a knot in my stomach. Whereas if I say to myself, I should have watched the time, but getting upset won't help. I will just take it one topic at a time. My stress level would be much lower. If I can't think positively, I have to at least learn how to counteract negative thoughts. This is so that the physical symptoms that were mentioned earlier and my realization of my worrying situation won't add on to my stress level. This is a toxic cycle that can lead many to remain in their helplessness. But art making has its way of breaking it.
Art making can create new stories and narratives for a trauma or a stressful situation. A trauma need not lead to a negative outcome. In fact, there are lots of research and stories about people becoming more resilient and achieving tremendous growth through a traumatic situation.
How can someone create new stories or narratives from a trauma? I can imagine how hard it is to see beyond an extremely bad situation, so it may be difficult to talk them out of it, ask them to look at the brighter side of things, and telling them that things will turn out fine.
I understand when we are in a very bad situation, our minds can get so overwhelmed and handicapped that we are not able to take in the kind advice that people may have for us. So that's where arts can help. In Transformative Arts, we use art as a platform and a safe place for people to have discussion and to build the connection that they have with each other. I once volunteered in a home where the girls had some very tough experiences in life. During one of the sessions, I gave each of them a broken ceramic pot, and I told them to create something new. And at the end of the session, I was so happy to see the amazing designs that they came up with. I told them that life is just like the broken pot. Sometimes things may not go back to its original state, and we may not welcome the change. But that's fine, because there could be so many possibilities in the future, and things will turn out fine.
That's such a beautiful metaphor.
Yes, I'll always remember that moment when we talk about the possibilities that the girls would like to see in their future. There was deep connection among all of us. There were tears in their eyes, and I was holding back my own tears too.
That's a priceless experience. And I never knew that transformative arts and healing can take place in a group setting.
Yes, it depends on the situation and the people involved, but it can take place in a group setting. Yellowren Productions had the opportunity to run art workshops in Yamada, Iwate, that's in Japan. Most of the attendees were survivors from the tsunami in 2011. They had similar experiences, so it was great for everybody to find support in one another. Despite the language barriers, we had such a wonderful time there with the seniors.
It's amazing to see how the arts can transcend boundaries and ignite a change. We know that life can get overwhelming sometimes, and you may feel all alone, but we want to encourage you that change is possible.
Yes, there are so many things we can do to heal and to empower ourselves. And creating art is one option.
Well, why don't we create something today?
Sure.
So, what can we create when we don't have art material at home?
For this piece of art, we don't need much. We just need a piece of paper and a black ink pen or a marker.
How do we go about creating it?
We can start with circles because circles are easy to draw, or it can be triangles or rectangles. So for example, let's begin with a small circle. And you can draw a bigger circle surrounding it. And another circle. Then you can start filling in each layer with a pattern of your choice. It could be stripes, it could be dots.
Okay.
So it's like a mandala piece of art. Usually they draw the circle to the size of our head, but to me that's not necessary, so work with what you're comfortable with. So repeating patterns can be easy to do because you don't have to think much about it, and the end result will be really nice. I like to use black because that will reduce the stress of thinking of what colors to use, but you can use colors too. So after you're done with one circle, you can move on to draw other circles and then fill in each layer with repeated patterns. And after drawing the different set of circles, you can also join the different circles together with patterns, and you can be creative about it.
Stress can be overwhelming, but just like how we doodle, let's take small steps to build our resilience and don't give up.